nervous because I'm here now.
Hey guys, welcome into another episode of 410 Sports Talk. I'm James Haskell along with my co-host Glenn Martin. But we also want to introduce a new friend of the show, Jake Sirkus from the Bengals Brawl podcast. Really excited to have him on to preview this game. Really excited to get into another AFC North divisional matchup and talk about the ins and outs and predictions of the game. So Jake, thanks for coming on the show, man.
No problem, guys. I'm very excited. They'll talking some Bengals Ravens. Great game this week. I don't know how you guys are 14-point favorites. Don't understand that, but we'll talk a little bit about that. Disrespectful. You're talking about a team that's 4-0 against the spread this year. I mean, us Bengals fans like to find the moral victories, and over the course of the last couple of years, Bengals have been pretty good against the spread. But I don't remember when we ever started 4-0 against the spread. So I'm looking to start 5-0 this week.
There you go. All right. Well, if you guys are betting, folks, listen to Jake. It sounds like he's got the in. But Glenn, I'll let you kick this thing off, man.
All right. Well, Jake, thanks again for coming on. With Zach Taylor now in his second season as the Bengals head coach, what are your impressions of him and his abilities as a football coach and as a leader?
Well, as a leader, he's way past what Marvin Lewis was, in my opinion, just based on the first couple of years. I mean, go back last year, week 1 in Seattle. He had them in that game till the end. The Bengals looked really, really good the whole way against a very good Seattle team at CenturyLink Field. But last year really wasn't that exciting. 2-14, obviously. Ryan Finley, those 3 games kind of got us Joe Burrow because I think Andy Dalton would have won at least 2 of those games. So that got us Joe Burrow, and there was a lot of hype this offseason. And, you know, kind of talking about the one big thing with Zach Taylor is that up until this past Sunday, he was he had no wins in a 1-possession game. He was 0-10-1, but this Sunday against the Jacksonville Jaguars, he became 1-10-1. So there's been a lot of question marks about his play calling, but as a leader, getting 5 out of the 6 draft, or 6 out of the 7 draftees this past draft were team captains, a ton of guys coming over from playoff teams in free agency, kind of building that culture. And what I think there are more leaders on this team than I've seen on a Bengals team in a while. And I think it's because of Zach Taylor.
Yeah, that's good to hear, because I think, you know, for longevity as a coach, it's important to be a strategist, but it's really important to be a leader of men, right?
Yeah.
So you talked about Joe Burrow. You also referenced the 2-14 season last year. From now till then, you know, there've been some changes, namely Joe being the sexy pick. And of course, you got the franchise quarterback. So you got the Corvette there under center. From outside looking in, from our vantage point, he's done nothing but impress. But internally, what's their opinion of Joe so far? How's his play been, and what are people saying?
Oh, well, I've said this a few times on, you know, a few past shows, that ever since Joe got into this building, or into that building in Cincinnati, that the thought has remained the same, that this guy is going to lead his team to a championship one day. And there has been nothing to show that should ever change, because that's been the belief from day one. It continues to be belief as he's improved each and every week in the 2020 season. And I mean, the guy's a stud. He's performing like a top-level quarterback already. He's efficient. The one thing though is he hasn't been able to connect on those downfield passes yet. But once he can, because he was so good last year at LSU at those passes 25 plus yards down the field, if he can connect with those, because there's a lot of weapons on the outside for Cincinnati, it just the sky is the limit for this kid, and the thought remains the same.
Is he already the best quarterback in Ohio?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, he went to Cleveland 2.5 weeks ago. He outplayed Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield threw the ball like 18 times that game. Bengals got abused in the running game, but Joe Burrow outplayed Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield is a complete game manager. He's like 11-1 or like 12-1 in games where he passes the ball less than 25 times, and like 3-15 in games where he passes the ball more than 25 times. That is literally the definition of a game manager. I don't know what else you can say about Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, and I tell you what, Jimmy will tell you, I've been saying for a while, Joe Burrow had the greatest college season I've ever seen at LSU, beating every top contender handily. So I was not necessarily thrilled to see him going to Cincinnati. I think he's going to be very, very good. But one of the frustrations from fans in Baltimore has surrounded the lack of pass rush for the Ravens, especially with just 4 down linemen. With that said, how does the offensive line look in Cincinnati, and are there some weaknesses that the Ravens could look to take advantage of?
Yeah, I actually think that's pretty interesting, because everyone talks about the Ravens defense, but they were not a very good pass rushing team last year. I mean, according to PFF, I think they were in the bottom third of the league in terms of pass rushing efficiency. They have a ton of guys and they blitz a lot, But I mean, you're going to blitz Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow is one of the best quarterbacks already in football against the blitz. He was last year at LSU. He loves the blitz, or he loves going up against the blitz. He loves coming out of the empty backfield. But this Bengals offensive line has really struggled up until this Jacksonville game. Jacksonville doesn't really have that many great players on the defensive side of the ball. But you got left tackle Jonah Williams, who's been a rock so far this year, so he's been great. But mostly it's the right side of the defensive line. That's where the struggles have come from. Bobby Hart has allowed the most pressures in all of football, and then at right guard, it's just been a revolving door of right guards. There's been Fred Johnson, Billy Price, and then last week Alex Redmond came up from the practice squad to fill that role, and he's kind of been the best right guard so far. But still, he's a practice squad player. And I've always said this, that he's a walking holding penalty. So, I mean, really, the right side is where they're going to struggle. You got Zadarius Smith coming on one end, Matthew Judon, Calais Campbell. Bengals offensive line is going to be in for a treat. And that's definitely an X factor.
I wish Zadarius was still here. He's been in Green Bay lighting up for a little while, but I certainly wish he was still.
Right. So Judon and then Calais Campbell, and then I love the draftee of Patrick Queen, Joe Burrow's old teammate. But yeah, I completely forgot about Zadarius Smith.
It'd be nice to still have him here.
It would.
I was salt in the wound right there. I'd take him over Judon any day.
Well, Judon's been phenomenal so far.
Well, not this season. Not this season. He just got his first 2 sacks last week after having just 3 combined tackles in the first 3 weeks. So he has really struggled. But last week he got back on track.
Okay.
Yeah. So the other thing we wanted to ask you about is, a vet in the locker room you guys have. There's a lot of anticipation surrounding the return of AJ Green, of course. But to this point, not producing like most were expecting. Once again, from the outside looking in, I'm not sure if the opinion is the same or different from your guys' perspective. But what do you think? That's due. What do you think that is the cause of that, and how can Burrow and Green improve as far as their connection goes?
I mean, a lot of people are talking about it's rust, and I'm 1 to 2 weeks away from being like not fine with just calling it rust, because this is 4 games in. So like this is the equivalent of the preseason, and a guy who hasn't played football since October of 2018. There's going to be some rust, but last week he looks slow. He's not getting any separation in his routes, and they have trusted T. Higgins more through his first 4 career games than the veteran AJ Green. So AJ needs to get back on track. They're trying to get him involved or like early on in the game, and it's just not working. He's had a few drops and overall just not getting any separation. So I'm still okay with calling it rust. But if this keeps going over the next couple of weeks, and especially this game against Baltimore, who AJ Green always does well against, if he can't contribute, I'm looking at T. Higgins to be this next number 2 receiver opposite Tyler Boyd.
Yeah, and that's who I want to talk about next, because Tyler Boyd certainly has been able to quickly develop the chemistry. He only has 1 more target than AJ Green does, but has turned that into twice as many receptions. So why is it that Boyd has been able to get this quick chemistry with Burrow and Green hasn't?
I think that was by design. Personally, I think that overall Joe Burrow, the way that he plays quarterback, is more fit for what Tyler Boyd does. Tyler Boyd loves to attack over the middle of the field on these crossing patterns. And they have designed a lot of stuff for Tyler Boyd, because even if Tyler Boyd is not getting separation, which is kind of rare, he is a vacuum when it comes to catching the football. Joe Burrow is putting the ball in perfect places for Tyler Boyd, and Boyd is just coming down with it. He had a great touchdown catch early on in the game against Jacksonville a few days ago. Got called back for a holding penalty by, I think it was Alex Redmond, the walking holding penalty. But yeah, Tyler Boyd has been phenomenal. He has looked like a number 1 receiver. He's looked like the guy who's going to sort of replace AJ Green. They're obviously different receivers, but this is the guy who's easily the number 1 receiver for Joe Burrow right now, and he's looked phenomenal.
So, we talked about the 2 receivers. You guys have more than that, and obviously you brought up T. Higgins, but one of the names I want to bring up is Joe Mixon. Was well compensated by the Bengals this year, and they seem to be using him more as a 3-down back, than in the years past. Could leaning on Mixon too heavily this early affect him negatively in the long run, or is it something you think the Bengals fans have been hoping to see for a while now?
Well, it's something that Zach Taylor's always been wanting to do. I mean, last year, Joe Mixon was not involved at all in the passing game. And when Zach Taylor got here, he said, we're going to get Joe Mixon involved. Like, he's going to be this 15-plus 100-yard scrimmage guy, and he's going to be involved in the passing game. And then he wasn't last year. And that was one of the things that Zach Taylor was under scrutiny for over the offseason, because then they compensated and paid Joe Mixon. And the media still kept asking Zach Taylor, is Joe Mixon this 3-down, 1,800 yard total scrimmage yard guy? And he's like, yeah, Joe Mixon's going to be a guy who can get 2,000 plus yards of scrimmage. And it's finally looking like Joe Mixon has that capability, because he showed it at Oklahoma. He had, I think, like some 500 to 600 yard receiving seasons at Oklahoma. He was that guy in that offense, and he came over to Cincinnati, didn't have that success with Marvin Lewis. Marvin Lewis really never passed the ball to running backs. But then Zach Taylor coming over from the Rams, who love Todd Gurley out of the backfield, and just didn't have that success. So far this year, it looks like that's where they're moving forward.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, on the other side of the ball, Jimmy and I had big expectations for the defensive front for the Bengals when they signed DJ Reader in the offseason to couple with Atkins and Dunlap. But the injuries have not allowed these guys to play together yet, if I'm not mistaken. So what is the health status of those guys and the rest of the team for this week's matchup?
So on Sunday against Jacksonville, the Bengals were missing their two best interior, or not their, well, Geno Atkins and Mike Daniels, who both can rush the passer, also both can stop the run. But DJ Reader's been really, really good. He leads the league in run stops, which is awesome. That's why they paid him, to help stop the run. That's why they paid all these guys. Your boy Josh Bynes has been pretty solid so far too. Great presence in the locker room. Mm-hmm. But overall, the Bengals need to get these guys back. They need to get Geno Atkins back. Mike Daniels just went on injured reserve, so he'll be out, I think, till week 7 or week 8. That's a huge hit. But specifically, Geno Atkins needs to come back for this game, because it's kind of been the situation with what AJ Green was last year, where Zach Taylor said we expect him to be back. He could come back week by week, and then AJ Green played 0 games last year. So if that's the situation, it's not very ideal. So once Geno Atkins is back in this lineup, Bengals fans can take a breath and watch probably the best football player on this team go to work.
Yeah, I think Geno Atkins has been grossly underrated his entire career. He's the ultimate fire hydrant, and yeah, great weapon on the inside. I wanted to ask you though about the team as a whole. Every team's goal coming into the season is to win the Super Bowl, but what are the Bengals realistically? What are their goals for this team, and what would the Bengals consider a successful season at the end of 17 weeks?
So this is funny, because sometimes I hate when Bengals fans do this. I'm very involved in Bengals Twitter, and sometimes I regret it, because people are talking about, Penei Sewell, Micah Parsons, all these guys who can completely come in and transform that individual position group. Penei Sewell is easily the best offensive tackle prospect in the last 20 years. And the Bengals could be in a position to get him and place him in at right tackle or left tackle, move Jonah to right tackle if they won like 3, maybe 4 games. But I'm not looking for that. This team already has a winning culture with players who have won in the past, and there's no reason to not be happy if this team wins 6 to 7 games. I think that should be the mentality. They're not building through the draft anymore. They've showed that they can come out and give tons of guaranteed money to outside free agents, which is good. Marvin Lewis never did that, but Zach Taylor comes in, establishing this winning culture. So that's what they need to keep building, because that championship window opens next year. So it's a lot harder to go from 3 wins to 9 wins than it is to go from 6 wins to 10 wins.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Well, if the Bengals do continue to fall further out of contention this season, do you expect them to be active near the trade deadline and use some of their current veterans on the team to acquire more draft picks?
No, there is no chance. Now, they said that they were going to be active in free agency last year. They were. They completely transformed this defense. They got younger. They became a better tackling team. But there's no evidence to believe that they're gonna ship off AJ Green for what, a 4th round pick at best. That's probably what he's worth right now, especially being on the franchise tag and having shown he hasn't been impressive at all. So there's no evidence to believe that they're going to be active. I would like them to look at the waiver wire and try to get some more depth on the interior of the defensive line. That's about it. I mean, no, just no. I'd be shocked if they make any moves, selling or buying at the trade deadline.
Interesting. So I think the Ravens fans would be mistaken to look at the Bengals record this season and look past this game as, or look at it as a cakewalk. What do the Bengals need to do here? You talked about them coming in at, with the 14-point spread. They're undefeated against the spread this year. How do they come out of this game with a victory?
by scoring more points, because no, seriously, this is the winning culture. Joe Burrow will tell you in every press conference there is absolutely no like moral victories. That's just, it doesn't exist in that locker room. I think with Marvin Lewis, a lot of the times, he kind of talked about having some moral victories, and the fans just absolutely hated it. It really felt like all of his press conferences were scripted, but that is completely changed with what Zach Taylor and Joe Burrow have brought into this locker room. I don't think the Bengals should be 14-point underdogs. I think you guys should be a little bit worried. No, I'm just kidding. No. I mean, a lot of Bengals fans on Twitter have put this on upset watch. I personally don't see it. I mean, I'm not going to pick against my Bengals, but this is a very good Ravens team that completely dominated us for 120 minutes last year in both games. And I pray that, so far I haven't seen that highlight of what Lamar Jackson did to that second level of our secondary in game 2 last year. I haven't seen it yet. Hopefully
you'll be seeing it Sunday. You'll
Yeah,
be seeing replays
right
of it on
TV.
Sunday, I'm sure. Well, the AFC North this year is certainly more competitive than last. With the Steelers leading at 3-0 and the Browns and Ravens right on their heels at 3-1, how do you see the division ultimately ending up?
So it's funny because the Browns have the easiest schedule out of all 4 of them remaining, but I think the Ravens are a way better team. I would expect you guys to win 12, 13 games. I never bought the 16-0 hype that Colin Cowherd was bringing, because this is a team that just hasn't been able to beat Patrick Mahomes, and it showed 2 weeks ago on Monday Night Football that that's exactly the case, that just they're in a different stratosphere. But no, this is still a very, very elite football team. I said that you guys were the second best team in the AFC and probably the second best team in football. So it just sucks that the Chiefs, you have to go through Patrick Mahomes, but this is still a 12-13 win football team. And, they should beat Pittsburgh twice. They'll beat them once. They'll beat Cleveland another time. So, yeah.
Sounds like you got us coming out on top. The division. So the last question we have for you here, and we'll let you go with this, is what is your official prediction of the outcome of this game?
Well, on the Bengals Brawl podcast yesterday, that the Bengals would win.
Oh, we lost your audio, Zach, a little.
Hear me?
Yeah, there you go.
There we go.
Okay. Is this live?
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay. So I'll restart. Sorry, I think my AirPod just died.
No worries.
Cool.
Of course they did. So I said on the Bengals Brawl podcast this morning that Bengals would win, specifically because I didn't want to pick against my own team. I said, what I say? I think I said 24 or 27-24 Bengals. No. No. Ravens win this. Bengals still cover. I have Ravens 27-17.
All right. Interesting.
Cool. Yeah, well, it should be a good one. I think it's going to be a heck of a lot more competitive than I agree with you. I think I saw it at 13 points. I think it's going to be much closer than that. But I'm hoping for a relaxing one because, we kind of got accustomed to that here in Baltimore. And that butt whooping 2 weeks ago still stings. And so I'm hoping that this one turns in our favor. But, Jake, thanks again for coming on. But can you let the fans know where they can find you and what you're working on?
Yeah, so my podcast, I'm a part of the Bengals Brawl podcast. You can follow us at Twitter. I think our name is at Bengals Brawl. So just search Bengals Brawl on Twitter. You'll find us. We're on Spotify. We're on Spreaker. We're on Apple Podcasts. We do a post-game show every Sunday right after the game that gets posted Monday morning. And then we do a weekly show. We record on Tuesdays, and it gets posted Wednesday mornings talking about injuries. And we've been having some pretty good guests on the show, and we're looking forward to some of our future guests as well. So it's a fun time. We'd appreciate if some Ravens fans started listening and, getting a sense of the team that's going to be beating them for the next 10 years.
I love it. Well, I tell you what, those that are listening right now are definitely going to be intrigued based on that comment alone. So I'm sure they'll find you on Twitter. But we appreciate it once again, man, and have a great evening.
You too, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Talk to you soon.